My name is Charlotte Green, though most people call me Lottie, and for most of my 29 years, I believed that if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, and showed up enough, I'd eventually earn a real place in my own family. But that belief shattered last Sunday around 6:42 p.m. when my father set down his wine glass, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "This cruise is for real family, Lottie." The room didn't go quiet. It erupted with laughter. My sister Vanna smirked into her linen napkin, and my brother Colton avoided my gaze, chewing his pot roast like it might save him from having to pick a side. But I just nodded, folded my napkin, and helped clear the plates, because if I didn't move, I might scream. Hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. Now, let's continue with the story. The thing about Sunday dinners at the greenhouse is that they always start out pretending to be normal. You'd never guess a storm was coming from the way my mother sets the table. Crisp white linens, silver candlesticks, the good plates she inherited from Grandma Rose. You'd never suspect what lies underneath the smooth gravy or the freshly baked yeast rolls. But I've learned, in this house, every polite gesture hides something colder. I pulled into the driveway at exactly 5 p.m., bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon in hand, $88 from the wine boutique downtown. A stupid splurge, really, but I'd hoped it would go well with Mom's rosemary pot roast. Hoped it would earn me one moment of belonging. Their house stood proud on East Taylor Street, a classic Southern home with a wraparound porch and pristine shutters, like something out of a magazine. It was the same house I grew up in, and the same one I left behind when I finally realized I'd never quite fit the mold my parents had set for a daughter. Right on time, Mom called from the kitchen as I walked in. Her voice was warm, but she didn't look up from the gravy she was whisking. "Vanna and Colton are already here." Of course they were. They always were. I found them exactly where I expected. Vanna sprawled across the living room couch like a bored cat, scrolling through her phone with perfectly manicured nails, and Colton glued to the TV, muttering at a college football game. "Hey, Lottie," he said, not looking up. Vanna gave me a glance that barely registered interest. Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence. I smiled. Tight. I brought wine. No one responded. I headed for the kitchen. Dinner was served with all the ceremony of a Southern holiday. Mom loading her dishes onto the table like offerings at a shrine. Dad carved the roast with a flourish, and everyone chatted about things that didn't matter. How hot it had been that week, which neighbor got a new roof, Colton's latest camping trip with his girlfriend. It wasn't until we were halfway through the meal that Mom turned to me and said, "So, how's work going, sweetheart?" I perked up a little, grateful for the attention. "Busy, but good. I've been handling this big group cruise booking, a 7-day Caribbean trip. Actually, I'm really excited about next month. I've been reading up on Grand Cayman's coral reefs for our family cruise. The preservation zone is supposed to be breathtaking." Silence. Not awkward, not surprised. Something heavier. Then Vanna snorted, the kind of laugh that says more than words. "Oh, honey, you thought you were coming?" I blinked. "What?" Dad set down his wine glass and smiled. "This cruise is for real family, Lottie. Just the four of us. The four of them, not five. Never five." I stared at them. The pot roast on my plate suddenly too salty, too heavy, too much. "But I booked it. I arranged everything." "Exactly," Vanna said with a shrug. "We needed your discount." Colton stared down at his potatoes. Mom shifted in her seat. No one came to my defense. A strange numbness settled over me, the kind you feel right before something inside you cracks wide open. I reached for the green beans. "Could you pass those, please?" And that was it. No screaming, no tears. Just the slow, searing realization that I had been used. Again. That after nearly 3 decades of trying to be the good daughter, the responsible one, the reliable one, I was still nothing more than an afterthought. They talked for the rest of the dinner about packing, weather forecasts, sunscreen preferences. I chewed and swallowed, nodding on cue, my heart sinking lower with each word. After dessert, I cleared the dishes. I needed something to do with my hands. I needed a reason to be in the kitchen, away from their laughter. The sound of water running masked the silence inside me, Later, as I drove home through the oak-lined streets of downtown Savannah, I kept the radio off. I didn't want music. I didn't want words. I wanted the kind of silence that lets pain settle into shape. The tears came only after I locked my apartment door. I slid to the floor and sobbed until my chest hurt. I cried for the girl I had been, the one who thought being helpful would be enough, the one who thought this time, they might see her. But that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles overhead, something shifted. Yes, I was hurt, deeply. But under that pain, something else stirred. Anger, cold and clean, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I didn't go into work the next morning. For the first time in nearly 4 years, I called in sick. I stared at my phone for a good 10 minutes before tapping the screen and saying the words, "Hi, Diane. I won't be in today. I'm not feeling well." It wasn't a total lie. My head was pounding, my stomach twisted into knots, and my heart, well, that was its own disaster. I turned my phone face down on the kitchen counter and sat at my tiny dining table, still in the oversized t-shirt I slept in. I didn't even make coffee. I just sat there, staring out the window at the brick courtyard below, where an elderly man walked his golden retriever like clockwork. His world hadn't changed. Mine had split in two. By noon, the silence in my apartment had grown oppressive. I finally moved to the couch, wrapped myself in a blanket even though it was 76 degrees outside, and powered up my laptop. My email inbox was open to the folder labeled Green Family Cruise. It was all still there. Confirmation numbers, itineraries, meal upgrades, a dozen back and forths between me and Royal Caribbean's support team. Every single detail had been run through me. I was the only point of contact. They hadn't even tried to disguise it. They used me. And worse than that, they laughed at me for believing I was one of them. The thing is, this wasn't the first time. It was just the first time they'd said it out loud. Last Christmas, I worked a late shift to cover for a pregnant coworker. When I arrived at Mom and Dad's around 9 a.m. on Christmas morning, the wrapping paper was already bagged up and the hot cocoa was lukewarm. "We just didn't think you'd mind, honey," Mom had said, patting my shoulder like it was all no big deal. The year before that, they planned a weekend trip to Lake Oconee the exact weekend of my birthday. "Oh, did that overlap?" Fauna had said, faux shocked. "You should have reminded us, Lottie." I didn't remind them. I never reminded them. I just showed up, smiled, and swallowed it down. Because somewhere in my mind, I thought if I kept showing up, they'd eventually see me. But they never did. I'd spent my entire life proving myself to people who decided before I was old enough to speak that I was the easy one, the responsible one, the background character in my own damn story. When Vanna totaled her car while texting, Dad put $7,000 toward her new one. When my transmission died last year, he told me to start saving. When Colton didn't want to go to college, Dad gave him a job at Green & Sons Construction. Never mind that Colton had no experience, no license, and no interest. I graduated summa cum laude while working 2 part-time jobs. I still remember the sound of my diploma arriving in the mail. I opened it alone in my apartment with a frozen dinner and a cheap bottle of white wine. No one in my family ever mentioned it. I shut the laptop and leaned back on the couch, letting the ceiling fan lull me into a slow, dangerous calm. My mind was whirring again. Not in panic, but in calculation. I still had access. Everything was in my name. My company's employee portal required that I be the primary contact for the booking to use the discount. It was a system designed for control and accountability. And they hadn't even considered that when they used me. My father's card was only charged for the deposit. The rest was set to auto-charge 72 hours before departure. That gave me time. Not just time to think, time to act. At 3 p.m., I took a long shower, dressed in clean clothes, and drove out of the city toward Tybee Island. I needed air, salt, space. I parked by the lighthouse and walked to the beach, where the late afternoon sun gave everything a golden tint. I let the wind pull at my hair. I watched waves erase footprints. I stood there for a long time, wondering if it made me a bad person. But the answer was simple. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing this because they hurt me over and over. And I finally had the power to say, enough. I opened my notes app and started drafting. Not a revenge plan, not really. A correction, a realignment. If they didn't see me as part of the family, fine. But they wouldn't get to exploit me like an unpaid travel agent and then fly off into the Caribbean sunset while I stayed home pretending it didn't matter. When I got home that evening, I turned my laptop back on. I created a new folder called Cruise Revisions. Then I started gathering every confirmation number, every policy detail, every deadline. I highlighted the cancellation windows. I downloaded the modification rules. I called a friend in corporate who walked me through the steps of rerouting reservations without setting off system alerts. I scheduled a 2-week leave from work under mental wellness, a company initiative introduced just 6 months ago. My boss Diane approved it within hours. Take the time you need, she said. You've earned it. Yeah, I had. That night, I pulled up listings for mountain cabins, someplace remote where the cell signal dropped off and no one could knock on my door. I found a perfect one. Nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, a modest 2-bedroom with no Wi-Fi and a wraparound porch overlooking the pines. I booked it for the same week of the cruise. If they wanted to act like I didn't exist, I would disappear. But not before showing them what they'd lost. And not before making sure they remembered what happens when the forgotten daughter finally decides she's done playing nice. I took the next 2 days to build my plan, not in anger, not in some red-hot fury, but in a cold, clean sort of silence that felt almost peaceful. I woke up early, made coffee, and opened my laptop like I was starting a workday. The familiar hum of the travel agency system greeted me. It was like muscle memory. Check reservations, update confirmations, cross-check guest lists. Only this time, I wasn't helping anyone but myself. Everything about the cruise was still under my name. The reservation system, Castaway Connect, had a back-end portal for employees. It let us manage group bookings with deeper access than customers ever saw. Timeline flexibility, substitution options, upgrade controls, and even direct messaging to cruise line reps. I had used that portal to secure the best perks for my family: early boarding, upgraded cabins, specialty dining packages. They didn't know just how much effort I'd poured into making this trip perfect for them. Or maybe they did. And that's what made the betrayal sting more. The trip was scheduled to begin 3 weeks from now. The cruise would set sail out of Port Everglades in Fort Lauderdale, about a 5-hour drive from Savannah. They were flying in the morning of the departure, with an overnight stay booked at a nearby hotel. I'd arranged that too, right down to the welcome drinks. I opened the itinerary spreadsheet I'd made for them, color-coded tabs, personalized excursion notes, confirmation codes. I should have known right then no one outside this family would ever do this level of work without being part of the experience. But I had known. I'd just hoped they'd see me. I scrolled down to the Passenger Manifest tab and hovered over my own name. It was grayed out, a placeholder. I wasn't included in the final list. They hadn't even removed me properly, just used me to book everything, and then left me sitting in the system like a ghost. I clicked into the Modifications panel. First, I changed the departure date from Friday to Saturday. Easy. The cruise line allowed 1-day shifts for no fee if done more than 2 weeks in advance. Next, I switched the primary contact from Walter Green back to myself. Technically, it had never been changed, but I made sure the automated messages wouldn't go to his inbox. I rerouted every single notification email to a secondary account I created, greencruisebackup@gmail.com. My parents wouldn't notice anything was missing, at least not yet. These emails always looked like generic spam anyway. Then I placed a temporary hold on the final payment, flagging the credit card for manual verification required. It bought me time, a solid week, maybe more. None of it would raise alarms. Not yet. The system would send out polite reminders, generic warnings. And unless someone actually logged in, which they never did, they'd assume everything was fine. They always assumed things were fine when I was handling them. By the time I closed my laptop that evening, I felt calm, not vindicated, not triumphant, just clear. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about clarity. It was about control. The next morning, I drove out to a quiet cafe near Forsyth Park and sipped on an iced latte under the shade of moss-draped oaks. I wrote out a checklist in my journal. Real paper, ink, something I could cross off with satisfaction. Book cabin, reschedule cruise, silence alerts, cancel shore excursions, notify Diane. One by one, I ticked them off. Then I drove out to the Blue Ridge Mountains. The cabin was even better than the listing showed. Wood-paneled walls, a fireplace, two Adirondack chairs on a porch that overlooked a wide green valley. No cell signal, barely any bars of Wi-Fi. The owner, a retired park ranger named Henry, handed me the keys with a weathered smile and said, "Folks come up here to forget things." Perfect, I thought. I stayed one night just to test the space. Hiked a short trail, lit a fire, let the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to be anywhere, to prove anything. Back in Savannah, I finished the final steps. I set an out-of-office auto reply for the entire week of the cruise. I even arranged for my neighbor, Miss Irene, to water my plants and bring in my mail. She didn't ask why, I just told her I needed to get away for a bit. "Good for you," she said. "Lord knows you've earned it." When I checked the family group chat that night, it was filled with happy noise. Vanna had sent a screenshot of a swimsuit she wanted to order. Mom responded with, "So cute." Colton posted a meme about seasickness. Dad shared a photo of a cigar he planned to bring on the ship. Not one of them mentioned me. I scrolled up, just to be sure. Nothing, not since Sunday dinner. It was like I'd vanished already. And maybe I had. I turned off notifications and silenced the chat. Then I clicked open the travel dashboard one final time. 3 weeks from now, they'd be standing at the airport, dressed in cruise casuals, dragging their luggage, and bickering about boarding passes. And when the gate agent told them there was no reservation under their names, when the hotel said no room had been reserved, when the cruise line said, "Sorry, payment failed," they'd look around for someone to blame. They'd look for me. But I'd be gone, up in the mountains, sipping wine on the porch of a cabin they'd never bother to find. And for once, they'd feel exactly what I had always felt: forgotten. Not out of malice, not out of cruelty, but because someone else had decided they didn't belong. The morning of the cruise, Savannah was already thick with heat by the time I loaded my overnight bag into the trunk of my car. A late summer sun blazed down on the cobbled streets as I made one last stop, Miss Irene's front porch. She greeted me in her floral housecoat, still holding her morning coffee. "You all set?" she asked, eyeing the keys in my hand. I nodded. "Plants are on a 3-day water cycle. Mail should come around 2 most days." She patted my arm. "You go get yourself some peace now, Lottie. Lord knows you need it." I smiled. "Thank you, Miss Irene." She gave me a long look, then added softly, "You don't owe anyone anything, you hear? You just rest." That stayed with me as I drove north on I-95, then west through small Georgia towns where the gas stations sold boiled peanuts and everyone called me ma'am. It was nearly dusk by the time I reached the foothills of the Blue Ridge. The road narrowed, winding through thick pines, and for the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders relax. The cabin was tucked away off an old gravel lane, its porch wrapped around like a hug. Inside, it was rustic but clean. Knotty pine walls, a cast-iron stove, plaid blankets folded neatly at the ends of the beds. The windows faced west, catching the golden wash of sunset through the trees. Henry, the owner, handed me a set of real keys. No keypad, no smart lock. "No Wi-Fi up here," he said. "Cell signal's spotty too. But there's a landline for emergencies. You'll have all the quiet you want." "Perfect," I told him, and meant it. That first night I didn't check my phone, I didn't check email. I made a simple dinner, eggs and toast, a glass of red wine, and sat on the porch watching the sky fade from peach to indigo. The air smelled like pine and earth, and the only sound was the rustle of wind in the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out, and I let myself breathe. The next morning, I woke just after sunrise. It was the day they were flying out. I imagined it clearly. Mom bustling around the kitchen, probably triple-checking everyone's boarding passes. Dad barking orders about traffic and parking. Vanna rolling her eyes, dragging her matching pink suitcases. Colton yawning, already in his aviators. They would all be in a hurry, half arguing and half laughing, oblivious. They had no idea what was waiting for them at the airport. I brewed coffee slowly, savoring the stillness. Then I turned my phone on and sat down at the small kitchen table with my laptop, tethered to the spotty satellite connection Henry had warned me about. It took a minute, but the messages started rolling in. 9:47 a.m. Dad. "They're saying the cruise isn't booked for today." 9:49 a.m. Mom, we confirmed this already. I printed everything. 9:50 a.m. Vanna, WTF is happening? We've been at the desk for 40 minutes. 10:03 a.m. Colton, did someone call Lottie? 10:04 a.m. Vanna, she's not answering. Typical. I muted the thread and opened my inbox. The travel system was functioning exactly as I'd arranged. Because I hadn't canceled anything. They still had a cruise. Just not today. The reservations had all been shifted by 24 hours. The payment hold I'd placed triggered a request for manual verification. Since I was listed as the primary and no one else had clearance, there was no way around it. Not without me. 10:27 a.m. Mom, we're missing the ship. This is a disaster. 10:35 a.m. Dad, I'm calling the travel agency. This is unacceptable. He would call and they would tell him, politely, that due to company policy, they couldn't speak to anyone but the account holder, which was me. I closed the laptop and stood by the window, watching a squirrel dart across the clearing. I should have felt triumphant. I should have been smirking, picturing their red faces and frantic phone calls. But mostly what I felt was silence, not absence, not gloating, just silence. A silence I'd never been given space to feel before. They had taken so much from me, my time, my energy, my quiet dignity, and now they would be forced to sit with the consequences. Not just of the booking, but of how they'd treated me for years. By noon, the messages shifted tone. Vanna, seriously? You did this on purpose? What is wrong with you? Colton, Lottie, please, can you call me? Mom, honey, if you're seeing this, please talk to us. Your dad is furious. I just want to understand. But there was nothing left to explain. I'd spent a lifetime explaining, making excuses for their behavior, laughing things off that hurt, showing up even when I wasn't invited. That part of me was gone now, like smoke trailing off into these mountains. By dinner time, I lit a fire in the old stove and cooked myself a steak. Just one. I poured a glass of the same Cabernet I had brought to Sunday dinner, the one no one had commented on, and raised it in a silent toast. To the invisible daughter, I said aloud, and then, softly, not anymore. The stars came out early in the mountain dark. I curled up on the porch swing with a blanket and listened to the crickets. My phone buzzed twice more before I turned it off. One missed call from Mom, one from Colton. I didn't answer either. Instead, I let the silence settle around me again, clean, cool, and finally mine. The greenhouse was quiet when I pulled up that Sunday afternoon. Too quiet. The kind of silence that comes after a storm, when everyone's waiting to see what's still standing. I parked behind Dad's truck and Colton's SUV, both angled just a little too straight in the driveway. Vanna's candy pink convertible sat in its usual spot like a smug smile. My palms were dry against the steering wheel, my stomach a stone. I didn't knock. I didn't use the old key I still had. I stood on the porch for a full minute, then knocked twice. Mom opened the door, eyes red-rimmed, a forced smile stretching across her face. Lottie, she said softly, like she wasn't sure if she was happy to see me or afraid I'd explode. Come in, sweetheart. We're all in the living room. The air inside was heavy, thick with something unspoken and long overdue. Dad stood by the fireplace, arms folded, his mouth a tight line. Colton sat in the armchair near the window, hands clasped like he was bracing for impact. Vanna lounged on the edge of the couch, arms crossed, her face frozen somewhere between guilt and hostility. I stayed standing. Before we start, I said, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to speak. Speak? Dad repeated, voice flat. You mean explain why you sabotaged your own family's vacation? You mean the vacation you never intended for me to be part of? I asked, eyes locked on his. The one I planned, arranged, and discounted for you? Lottie, Mom began, it wasn't meant to hurt you. Then, what was it meant to do? I cut in. Because when I said I was excited for the cruise, you all laughed. You looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't real family. And no one corrected that. Not even you, Mom. She looked away. Dad stepped forward. You could have just asked if you were invited. You assumed. I didn't assume. I was never told I wasn't going. I snapped. We talked about excursions, outfits, cabins. I gave up my weekends arranging everything. And the only reason I found out was because I dared to feel excited. It was a joke, Vanna muttered. You're always so dramatic. A joke? I said, my voice quieter now. Was it a joke when you scheduled the lake house on my birthday last year? When Christmas morning came and went without me? When my graduation didn't matter because you had your wisdom teeth out? That wasn't fair, she said, sitting up straighter. I was in pain. And I was alone, I replied. And I always have been, haven't I? The convenient daughter, the one who doesn't need help, the one who pays her own bills, fixes her own car, and still shows up with gifts and wine, hoping for something, hoping that one day maybe someone would see me. We do see you, Mom whispered. You never needed as much. That's not love, I said. That's neglect with a polite face. Colton leaned forward. She's right, he said quietly. I've been thinking about all of it, and she's right. We've treated her like she's supposed to carry everything and be okay with getting nothing back. Vanna rolled her eyes. Oh, please, now you're St. Colton. No, he said. But I'm not blind anymore. I turned back to Dad. This wasn't just about the cruise. That was just the final crack. This is about every dinner, every family photo I'm not in, every birthday forgotten, every achievement ignored. I didn't ruin your trip. You did, when you made it clear I was never part of the real family to begin with. Dad's face was red now, the tips of his ears burning. You don't get to stand there and act like some martyr. You messed with our travel plans? That's real money, Lottie, real consequences. And excluding me had no consequences? I asked. You didn't just forget to invite me, you used me, then humiliated me. I returned the favor. That's what consequences look like. You think this proves a point? He snapped. All you did was prove you're bitter and spiteful. No, I said. All I did was stop begging for a seat at a table I was never welcome at. You're mad that I finally made you feel what I felt my whole life. The room went still. Vanna shifted, uncomfortable. Mom wiped her cheek. Colton looked down, and Dad. He just stared at me like he didn't recognize me. I don't know who you are anymore, he muttered. That's funny, I said, because I've always known exactly who you were. I walked toward the door, but Colton stood up. Wait, he said. Please don't leave like this. I paused. Why not? Because I want to change. I don't want this to be the end. His voice cracked slightly. I miss you already. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Then you know where to find me. And I walked out, quietly, without slamming the door, because for the first time, I was in control of my exit. I didn't expect Colton to actually reach out again. People say a lot of things when emotions run high, promises in living rooms that fade like steam once the door shuts. But 3 days after I left my parents' house, he texted me. Hey, I meant what I said. Coffee this weekend? I stared at the message for longer than I should have, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then I typed back. Okay. Saturday, the Foundry Cafe, noon. Saturday came gray and cool, a whisper of fall in the Savannah air. The Foundry was my favorite spot, cozy, unpretentious, and far enough from our parents' neighborhood that I could breathe. I got there early, took a seat by the window, and wrapped my hands around a steaming mug of oat milk latte. Part of me hoped he wouldn't show. Another part knew he would. He arrived exactly on time, looking tired and slightly less polished than usual. His hair was messy and his shirt untucked, like he'd dressed in a rush or maybe hadn't slept well. He ordered coffee without asking what I wanted, he remembered, and slid into the chair across from me. We didn't speak for the first full minute. Then he said, You were right. I blinked. About what? He let out a breath. Everything. The way we've treated you. The way I let Vanna get away with things just because it was easier than confronting her. The way I leaned on you when it was convenient and ignored you the rest of the time. I didn't see it until you spelled it out, but once you did, I couldn't stop seeing it. His voice was low, steady, not rehearsed. It felt honest. I appreciate you saying that, I said. More than I can explain. He nodded slowly. I didn't want to believe we could be that awful. But looking back, we were. And it wasn't just the cruise. That was just the part where we got caught. I let his words settle before I answered. I think I got so used to it, I stopped noticing how deep it hurt. I convinced myself that being the strong one meant accepting being left out. You shouldn't have had to, he said. And I'm sorry. We sat in silence again, not uncomfortable this time. The cafe buzzed around us, cups clinking, quiet laughter, the hum of espresso machines. I watched a little girl across the room spinning her plastic straw, her mother not noticing. I never hated you, I said quietly, even when I felt invisible. I just wanted you to see me. I do now, Colton said, and I believed him. He told me how things had been at home since the cruise debacle, how Dad had barely spoken about it but had started locking his study door more often, how Mom kept trying to normalize things with banana bread and awkward check-ins, how Vanna had gone full drama queen on social media, posting quotes about betrayal and toxic family. She's telling people you had a breakdown, he said, that you snapped under pressure and ruined everything. I snorted. Sounds about right. But some people are questioning it. Aunt Judith's been asking questions. Even Uncle Nate reached out. That surprised me. Aunt Judith lived in Charleston and only came around at Christmas. But she had always looked at me a little longer than the others, like she saw something they didn't. I made a mental note to call her. I think they're afraid of what you'll say, Colton added, because if you tell the truth, they know how it sounds. I'm not out for revenge, I said. I just needed to take my voice back. He nodded, his eyes soft. And you did. When we stood to leave, he gave me a tight hug. Not the kind you give out of habit, but the kind that says, I'm here now, even if I wasn't before. I walked home lighter. That evening, I got a message from Mom, not a text, a voicemail. Hi, sweetheart. I made your favorite lemon bars today and thought of you. I miss you. I know things have been hard, but I'm hoping we can talk soon. Please call me when you're ready. I love you. It wasn't an apology, but it was a step. Still, I didn't respond. Instead, I ran a warm bath, lit a candle, and opened the book I'd been meaning to finish for months. I let myself have peace without guilt. Later that night, curiosity got the best of me. I checked Vanna's Instagram. Her latest post was a dramatic quote over a black and white photo of a broken teacup. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who shatter you the most. Dozens of comments followed. Our cousin Megan had written, OMG, what happened? You okay? Others chimed in with heart emojis and affirmations about healing and self-care. She hadn't mentioned my name, but the implication was clear. I was the villain in her version of the story. Fine. Let her have her story. Because for the first time in my life, I was writing mine. Mom called again the following Sunday. I let it ring twice before I answered, already bracing myself for the tight tone, the soft, guilt-laced sighs she was so good at. But her voice, when it came through the receiver, was small, not weak, just unsure, like she was stepping into unfamiliar territory. Hi, Lottie, she said. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I owe you an apology. I didn't say anything. Not just about the cruise, she continued. About a lot of things. I haven't been fair to you. I told myself you were the strong one, the independent one, and that you didn't need as much from us. But all I was really doing was making excuses for not showing up the way I should have. A lump caught in my throat. I didn't know how to parent someone like you, she said. You didn't ask for help. You always handled everything. It made it too easy for us to forget you needed care too. Why didn't you just ask what I needed? I asked, my voice shaking. Instead of deciding for me? I don't have a good answer, she admitted. But I want to do better. Your father and I both do. If you're willing, we'd like to talk. Really talk. No pretending things are fine. I exhaled slowly. Okay. We're having dinner next Sunday. Just dinner. You, me, your dad, and Colton. Vanna, she paused. She's not ready, but that doesn't mean we can't start. Something about the way she said start made me believe she actually meant it. I said yes. The week passed slowly. I kept my head down at work, avoiding small talk and politely deflecting questions from coworkers who'd seen Vanna's melodramatic posts. Diane gave me a knowing smile once but didn't press. I appreciated that more than she knew. Sunday arrived with a softness in the air. It had rained that morning, and the world smelled like wet grass and turned soil. I arrived at my parents' house a few minutes early and sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Then I got out. Inside, everything looked the same. The same beige walls, the same floral couch, the same photo collage on the mantel. Though now I noticed a small new frame had been added. It was a photo of me at my college graduation, standing alone in my cap and gown. I blinked at it. It hadn't been there before. Mom greeted me at the door with trembling hands. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. "Come sit." We ate in the dining room, just the four of us. The conversation started awkward, everyone walking on verbal eggshells. But gradually, it softened. Colton talked about switching to a different construction company. Mom shared that she'd started attending a women's support group at the library. Dad stayed mostly quiet, chewing slowly, sipping sweet tea, watching. When the plates were cleared, Mom wiped her hands on a dish towel and turned to me. "I'm sorry," she said, not blinking, "for every birthday we missed, for the graduation, for Christmas, for letting your sister's drama eclipse your voice, for calling you strong like it was a reason not to care." She looked over at Dad. He cleared his throat, the sound like gravel in his chest. "I'm not good at this," he muttered. "That's never stopped you from talking before," I said without malice. He huffed. "Fair enough." A long pause followed. Then, "I should have treated you better, Lottie. You deserved better from me." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't flowery or poetic, but it was enough. Then he said something that truly stunned me. "We're planning another cruise, Thanksgiving week. This time you'll be involved from the start. If you want to help, not for the discount, just because we want you there." I stared at him. "You want me to plan it?" "We want you to be part of it," he corrected. "And if you're willing, your input would mean a lot." My voice was soft. "I'd like that." Later, as we carried dishes back into the kitchen, Mom brushed a hand over my shoulder. "Your brother asked for your lemon bar recipe, by the way. Said they tasted better when you made them." I laughed under my breath. "That's because I don't forget the zest." She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it reached her eyes. After dessert, as we all sat in the living room, I noticed something else. My place on the couch wasn't the leftover corner. It was beside my dad. He offered me the seat without hesitation. It was small, but it was something. And after all this time, something felt like a beginning. 6 months later, I found myself standing in the kitchen of my parents' home again, but everything felt different. The spring sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow across the countertops. The house smelled like lemon, butter, and roasted garlic. Mom was stirring gravy at the stove, and I was checking the rolls in the oven, wearing one of her old aprons and humming under my breath. We hadn't done this together in years, and yet it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Few more minutes," I said, peeking at the golden tops of the rolls. "Perfect," Mom replied, smiling. She looked different these days, less tense, more grounded. Her voice no longer carried that brittle, performative brightness. It had taken work, coffee dates, hard conversations, even therapy sessions she'd nervously started back in January. But she had kept showing up. So had I. The dining room was already set, the good china, cloth napkins, the centerpiece I brought from a little florist downtown. There was a framed photo of us all on the sideboard. One from last month's family picnic, where Colton's fiancé had taken a surprisingly candid, surprisingly joyful picture of all five of us, even Vanna, standing beneath a magnolia tree. That had been the first time in over a year that we were all in the same place without tension crackling in the air like static. Today was Easter dinner. But more than that, it was the first time in my life I felt like I truly belonged in this house. Like I was no longer a guest or a helper or the forgotten one in the background of other people's stories. Everyone had arrived early. Dad was carving ham in the dining room, chatting with Colton about home renovation projects. Colton no longer worked for Dad. He'd taken a job with a new firm and was finally thriving on his own. We texted regularly now, exchanged articles, inside jokes. When his engagement became official, I was the first person he told. Mom brought a tray of glazed carrots to the table. You okay? She asked, her tone quiet. Better than okay, I said. Thanks for asking. Just then, Vanna walked in with a bowl of deviled eggs. Her dress was simple, her makeup toned down. She didn't say anything snide, didn't make a show of arriving late or rolling her eyes. She just set the bowl down and looked at me. Hey, she said, need help with anything else? Just the rolls, I said. Almost done. She nodded, then lingered for a second. You look good, Lottie. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't emotional, but it was something. At the table, Dad stood up before we started eating. That alone was surprising. He wasn't a toast kind of guy. I just want to say... He paused, clearing his throat. This past year hasn't been easy. We've all had to look at ourselves more honestly than we maybe wanted to. But I'm grateful. Grateful that we're here, that we've tried, and that we're still trying. His eyes met mine. And Lottie, I want to say thank you. For coming back, for standing your ground when you needed to, for not giving up on us. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you, I said softly, for listening. He nodded, then gestured toward the ham. All right, enough of that. Let's eat. Laughter broke out across the table, warm, unforced. We passed dishes around, joked about Dad's uneven carving, praised Mom's lemon bars, and teased Colton about his wedding playlist. Even Vanna joined in, asking about my recent work trip to Chicago. Not to one-up me, just to ask. After dinner, I stepped out onto the porch with a cup of tea. The sky was soft and streaked with pastels, the scent of jasmine drifting through the air. Aunt Judith, who had been invited at my request and embraced by my parents with sincere warmth, joined me. She leaned on the railing, looking out over the yard. You did it, you know, she said. You cracked something open in them, in all of us. I smiled. I didn't know if it would stick. Change takes time, but you started it, and you're still standing. We stood there a while, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Later, as I packed up to leave, Mom slipped a note into my bag. I didn't read it until I got home. It was short. Thank you for not disappearing, for holding up the mirror. We're better for it. I hope you are too. Love, Mom. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my journal. That night I sat by my window. The city sounds soft in the distance. I thought about everything that had happened. The laughter at Sunday dinner, the cold, calculated click of keys on my laptop, the silence in that mountain cabin, the reckoning, the repair. It hadn't been easy. There were still scars, still moments where old habits resurfaced like ghosts. But there was also something new. Space. Space for truth, space for love, space for me. They didn't define me anymore. But for the first time, I could be part of them on my terms. And that was enough. Maybe even more than enough. I hope you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss touching stories. Leave a like and then comment below what you thought of the emotional stories. See you in the next video.